Well, good afternoon all, and welcome to this month's Certainty Expert webinar. I am Astrid Bowser, Director at Certainty, the National Will Register. Many of you are aware and use the Certainty Will Search service to search for missing, unknown, or indeed later wills. Certainty Will Search does not just search the register, it searches for wills in areas where the deceased used to live or work throughout the UK, including Scotland and Northern Ireland, with the professional will writers from the IPW, IPWS and Society of Will Writers, and at storage facilities such as the National Will Archives and the National Will Safe. We're delighted to welcome Gill Steel, who is presenting the next instalment of Certainty Expert webinar today titled Probate Price Transparency, a Compliance Nightmare or a Business Opportunity. A solicitor of high standing in the legal community, Gill has earned considerable respect as a knowledgeable and compelling conference speaker with regular engagements throughout England and Wales. Backed by her own experiences in and for private client departments, Gill identifies with the everyday challenges that professionals face, enabling her to provide learning and development opportunities that inspire them to develop the expertise they need to deliver commitments competently to their clients. She is a member of the Society of Trust and Estate Practitioners, of the UK Practice Committee and the Association of Taxation Technicians. Should you have any questions, do type the question into the comments box and let us know who you are and where you're from. Jill will attempt to answer as many questions as possible at the end of the Certainty Expert webinar, time permitting of course. So with that, Jill, I will now hand over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Astrid. We all know that competition for legal services is getting hotter and hotter. And from December 2018, the SRA requires all firms to publish information on prices and services. From the private client practitioner's perspective, these include the collection and distribution of assets belonging to a person following their death. And this is where they are within the UK, and also the matters are not contested. So how did we get here? The Competition and Market Authority published its final report into legal services in December 2016. It concluded the market was not working well for individuals and small businesses because of the lack of upfront information. The Legal Services Board, the sort of Uber regulator of the professions, tried to encourage regulators to voluntarily introduce improvements in their sector. But when this did not materialise, it insisted on change. The SRA and the other frontline regulators consulted on proposals. The Law Society commissioned research on consumer behaviour in relation to the purchase of legal services as part of these consultations. Then in June 2018, the SRA published its final decision to require law firms to publish their prices and service information on their websites from December 2018. The Law Society provided a briefing for members following the announcement, and I think that's a very useful piece of research. A report by the London Economics and YouGov for the Law Society was summarised in an article in the Law Society Gazette by Joe Egan. And that article indicates that consumers' preferences can change based on the complexity of legal needs, that decisions by consumers on which legal service provider to select can also change based on protections and regulation, and that consumers want different things in different areas of law. And sadly, consumers do not always read the small print. But they do assume that all service providers in the legal sector are regulated equally. Well, we know that's not necessarily true. So the aim of this webinar is to highlight the tough requirements of the SRA's transparency rules and to reveal how to make a powerful case for consumers to use your firm for probate work and so become your client. As a result, I hope that probate practitioners will be able to comply professionally and dynamically with the requirements of the new rules. This is what this is all about. So with that in mind, I have basically divided this webinar into 5 areas. First of all, a short examination of some of the key questions that should test your firm's offering against your competitors and to see whether or not you're meeting the rules in the way you perhaps should. Then I'm going to move on to how to approach pricing generally, with some comments on the clarity of the process and also displaying information about your probate team, a factor that's required under the rules, and extra information that you could provide if you wanted to. Now, I know that that's a challenge because obviously at the end of the day, the more we write, the less people read. And as we saw from the Law Society research I mentioned earlier, people don't read the small print. But it's really about engaging with people, trying to make them see that what you've got on offer is something worth paying the price for so that you cover your costs and make a nice profit, but at the same time have happy customers. So let's make a start then. Some of the key questions I think is worth testing yourself about as to whether or not the effort you've made on this transparency has been worthwhile. I'm hoping that all of you are compliant at the moment. So the first question I posed, really, if you can read it on the slide, was what benefits does the client gain by using your firm when compared to all your competitors? So emphasize that. This is the thing that you need to emphasize. What are the benefits gained by a client in using your firm, not just the price? So in explaining how your prices are organized, you can easily expand on what the benefit is by using service A or B. If you have a gold service, a silver service, a bronze service, this kind of thing. Many firms do make a difference between different services levels that they offer. And what criteria, secondly, do your clients use for buying decisions? Again, why not look at the results of the surveys that were done for the Law Society and the information that was available that Joe Egan summarised? Basically, what criteria do clients generally use for buying decisions? Well, yes, price is one of them, but also speed, convenience, reliability. These are things which you can differentiate yourself on as well, not just on price. Thirdly, ask yourself, what value do your clients place on receiving the benefits you provide? So you've basically got what you think are a list of benefits that you're providing for clients. Are those the things that clients actually value, or are they looking for something else? And the only way you're going to find that out really over the longer term is to ask them. And fourthly, what overall distinguishes your firm's offering from the competition? Now, those are general high-level questions to ask yourself, and I think this is where a little bit of information about the actual price transparency rules can be helpful. What I did to help inform this webinar was I took a piece of research of my own looking at 10 local law firms, and they produced for me an interesting response. That's my interviewing of the sites, not talking to people, but just looking at these following questions in relation to their website. So basically, in my opinion, when I started addressing these questions, I found that only one firm explained the probate process. All firms were compliant in most areas, although one, in my opinion, only just barely. Some used examples, how to illustrate the way the firm operates and what it charges. So there's a very wide range, and I'm going to use that information just as a way of explaining some of the outcomes here that you might like to do the same exercise in your own area. So the first few questions are very general that I want to ask. The first question I ask myself is the relevant information that's got to be given in a prominent place on the website? So I've got a little picture of my home page there. If I was a solicitor's firm, I would be expecting on that home page menu at the top there that as an extra button that says price or information about costs or something like that. And that in 6 out of 10 of the cases I looked at was very straightforward. There was a separate tab on the home page. But for the other 4, it was really quite difficult to find the information. I had to drill down through the site to find the information on different sections of the site, depending, of course, on what service I was looking for. So I think it wasn't in a prominent place on the website in 4 out of 10 cases. Secondly, is the information easy to read? So in other words, this is how does it look on the page? Is it easy because of the size of the text, the style? I think without exception, all in my sample presented what they were writing in an easy-to-read format. After all, a website should be compliant with the needs of people who might find it hard to read things in small print, and also online it's much easier to read things if there's more white space and it's clear. So I think most firms manage that reasonably well. Third question I asked myself is it written in plain English without jargon? Now, for the most part, the words were written in reasonably plain English. But I have to say, of course, some of the words we have to use, like extracting a grant of probate and this kind of thing, are jargon in themselves, are they not? And if we use the word executor, personal representative, of course we know what it means, but some of the people looking at the website might not. And there was only one firm out of the 10 that referred people to a glossary of terms to be sure that they were understood. That's poor. I think that should be a much more general offering. Certainly competitors outside solicitors' practice definitely use plain English and make an effort to avoid the use of jargon. Now, we're going to go on to the next series of questions I asked, which were directly about pricing. Some of you may read Tolley's bellwether reports. They bring them out reasonably regularly about the state of the legal market. And their recent report showed that solicitors believe 33% of their business on average is won purely on price, rather than on the expertise of their firm. Now that's what solicitors believe, and whilst work can be lost on price, I do believe it can be won on service. So let's then ask ourselves the question, what exactly is included in the price you've displayed? Again, one firm didn't even explain that they had not included VAT or excluded it from their price. So clearly we need to show what is included and what isn't included. It's not just a list of things you're doing, but simple things like disbursements and VAT, which are excluded in most cases from any price quoted. So I don't think they were compliant at all, that particular firm. So that simply shows how poor their offering was in general, that they didn't even mention where VAT came into the picture. Most firms did manage to approach this in a similar way, following to a large extent the template in the SRA's guidance on their website. The danger, though, of using a template is that, of course, it does mean that there is the ability to directly compare one firm with another. And in my sample of 10 firms, 2 firms of similar size did use just the template and diverged completely on price. For example, on the one hand, one firm said that for a typical simple estate as the one that we have to give our prices for, they would charge between £3,500 and £4,500, whereas the other firm reckoned it would be £10,080. Again, for non-taxable estates that was. But where the estate was taxable, the comparison was even more stark. One firm said it would be between £5,000 and £6,000 for a taxable estate, and the other said it would be nearer to £26,800. So one can see from that very stark example that when you follow just a template without giving yourself a chance to shine, it will encourage people to compare just on the price, and on those prices you clearly wouldn't go for the one that's going to charge you potentially £26,800. So for many cases, the firms chose to give a range of prices, as I've described in these simple examples, and this was followed through even with more complicated cases that people had chosen to talk about on their websites. So a range of prices rather than a fixed price was normal. One firm did offer a fixed price, and another just offered a fixed price for just obtaining the grant and nothing else. So obviously, if there's going to be some kind of restriction on the basis of charging, then clearly that needs to be explained. Some of those explained it mostly in terms of whether something was complicated or not, without really giving a lot of explanation as to what made things complicated. Other firms did list things which would affect complexity, such as foreign assets, but others were quite straightforward and said if you've got more than X number of beneficiaries or there's more than one property, that would affect the price. What type of delivery is offered? Now, this is something which nobody addressed at all. There was no suggestion in the sample of my 10 firms as to whether any of them were prepared to offer an online service or some kind of fast-track service, because the information was all brought into the office and dealt with all in one go on the day. I know firms that do that somewhere else in the country, but that wasn't on offer. So in other words, the type of delivery was exactly the same, apparently, in all the firms, because nothing was said about this. And I think this would be, again, a useful way to distinguish yourself from everybody else if you have something special to offer here. Being different can really affect the price. So if there is a special type of delivery, perhaps expedition, then why not say so? For example, on the high street, we're familiar with the reduction in the number of ophthalmic opticians. We have Specsavers who are offering a price saving through sheer volume, but we've also got Vision Express, who distinguishes itself, as the name suggests, by doing things quickly for a different fee. So again, a type of the way in which you deliver the service can affect the price, and you can display that in your own websites. Okay, so continuing with the questions I asked myself, the next ones were about the process. The question I've wanted to really answer, because this is a requirement of the rules, is what are the key stages in the probate process? Obviously, you have to do this for each of the areas of law that's required. So what are the key stages in the particular process? I have to say in my sample, this was tackled really poorly. Only 2 out of the 10 firms addressed this at all well. One used some case studies which were very practical and easy to read, and I think that would be an absolutely winning approach, because I could easily see that firm understood my needs, had displayed very simply and clearly what was involved in 2 different kinds of probate process, where there was tax involved and where there wasn't, and therefore what they did for a client in those circumstances and what they charged. And I thought that was a very friendly way of presenting the information. The other firm that managed to address this did it more formally, but nevertheless they were the only 2 firms that bothered to do it at all. So don't forget, we do have to do this. 11, what would be a typical timescale? For most firms, the distinction was between getting the grant itself and then completing the estate administration. So most firms said between 3 to 6 months to obtain the grant and 6 to 12 months to complete the transaction. But some of the firms also spoke in terms of the number of chargeable hours rather than real time. Now, I know that's helpful if you're charging by the hour, and obviously that gives some idea of the kind of fee that's going to be chargeable, but it's not particularly helpful on its own, because obviously you're needing to be able to give someone an idea how many months they're going to be working with you over this project and have some realism about when monies, for example, are going to be released. So I think it's better to talk in terms of the actual real time it's going to take place over, rather than just chargeable hours. By all means do both, but I think the client's wanting to know how long in reality is it going to be before mum's affairs are wound up. Obviously, the fact that you talk about chargeable hours and then you say you're offering a fixed fee, that's irrelevant, isn't it? The client who's looking for a fixed fee and finds it on your site might be rather confused by then you talking about chargeable hours. So, again, be consistent in what you're saying when you're talking about time scale. I once did some training for some trainee solicitors, and I asked them to describe to me how they would make baked beans on toast. And it was very, very interesting how many of them started by saying, well, you just put the beans in the pan. No, what about acquiring the beans in the first place, the fact that you need a heat source of some kind, whether you're putting it in the microwave or not, that kind of stuff. There was a lot of things that were not mentioned, just one aspect of it. And this is, I think, is where people sometimes forget that, like recipes, really, you've got to spell out the correct stages, and then you can put some time frames about it. And the next section of question is really around staff. So you must address whether or not you're following the correct information that has to be displayed for each person in the team. Now, it is about solicitors, I admit, so it's not surprising that some of the firms only dealt with solicitors and not their wider team. But for each member of the team, you need to give the number of years of post-qualification experience that they have. Only 7 out of the 10 firms that I looked at did this. Also, 2 areas which were not dealt with at all in any of the 10 firms' examples was the estimated number of cases that a person has dealt with and the percentage of their time that is spent on probate. Now, I realise that these are somewhat awkward things to have statistically available, but at the same time, if someone is looking for an expert, and after all, people do value skill and expertise, despite price being seen as the main driver, they do value the expertise of someone to be able to demonstrate that this person has already dealt with 100 probates in the last 5 years and that they spend all their time just doing estate administration would make you feel perhaps more willing to use that person than someone who's only done half a dozen over 10 years and spends most of their time doing residential conveyancing. So I think perhaps that's why people have fudged this by just not mentioning it at all, but to find that no firm had bothered to say how many cases a person had handled and how much of their time was spent on probate seemed to me a shortcoming. As to the level of complexity, in other words, what skills have they stretched themselves to do? Obviously, some people in the team will be doing regularly complicated cases, and others will be doing more of the sort of general cases which you quoted for. So the level of complexity that someone's experience has given them the opportunity to share is also important, and this was addressed in 6 out of 10 of the firms I looked at. We're also supposed to identify what qualifications supervisors have. And again, I was surprised that only 7 out of the 10 firms I looked at had bothered to talk about the qualifications of the supervisor. So where you had a real opportunity to sell the team and their skills and expertise, this section was really rather poorly dealt with. And I think you've missed a trick there. You could do so much more. The final question I asked myself when I was reviewing the firms was there any links to other useful information, such as government websites or the Legal Choices website? Now, this is important too, because again, it's mentioned in the guidance from the SRA. In the event, in my little survey, only 2 firms chose to provide links to other information, and in each case this was to the IHT calculator on the government website. So that was good because it gave the opportunity to explain why there's a difference between taxable and non-taxable estates without having to go into too much detail. So you could simply say, check here whether your estate's over the taxable limit, and then you'll know where you are. And that was a good idea. But there are so many other ways you could have approached this by displaying links to other services that, for example, are only used by your firm. So you could show how you use different information, spell out how you achieve efficiency gains over your competitors. It might be through links with local suppliers of information or national suppliers like Certainty. So armed with similar information from a review of your competitors, why not start again, focusing on the wise words of the Legal Services Board Consumer Panel, in which they said quality in legal services means combining up-to-date legal knowledge and skills with good client care to deliver advice in a way that is useful. While some aspects of good service are visible, consumers lack the expertise to judge technical matters and so focus on client care. They assume that legal advisors are competent and that someone is making sure standards are being maintained. So are you able to say that you have, for example, expert lawyers specializing in probate inquiries? Because that's a really good place to start, and you could then expand on the ways in which you deliver your service for the price that you're quoting. And this is what makes you different. So let's move on then to how to approach pricing. I'm going to say some very basic points first of all, because I think that there's two crucial things to bear in mind when you're considering how to set your prices. As we've seen, they can be very varied, and that doesn't really help when we're talking to consumers we want to convert into clients. So our price is often determined by the volume. So basically, what is the price that we can afford to sell something at? Well, it will depend on how many sales we can get at that price in order to be able to cover our overheads and make a reasonable profit. So the price level is often set by the sales level, and if you have too many sales, you can't deliver a good product. So if your price is too low, you might be profitable, but actually a lot of that might not be recovered because people are dissatisfied with your level of service. So I've seen in many cases firms focus on setting a price, perhaps a fixed fee, but then they actually run their business on the basis that everybody does 1,200 hours of chargeable time at a certain hourly rate. But that's not going to work if your fixed fee means that for every job that they do, they're spending more time than the chargeable hours for that fixed fee would represent and are having to discount their chargeable hours accordingly. So your budgeting goes out of the window. So I appreciate that customers are looking for fixed fees more and more, and to set them to make a profit is what you should do. You've got to be competitive, and you've got to maintain quality standards. So if those factors mean that the fixed fee you've set makes it hard continuing to do things the way you have, then you've got to look at your efficiency and see how you can improve productivity by making some efficiency gains. This means changing the way you do things. So something's got to give if you're wanting to sell enough product at the price that you think is competitive and run your business. The second thing to consider when setting the price is obviously against what are you comparing it with. So benchmarking is a useful tool. Some of you might actually join in with benchmarks that are offered, and you sign up and send your accounts in, and you compare yourself with those others who've signed up for that service. So what you've got to do is try and compare your service with the competition. And in fact, until you do that, and that's why I've done my little survey to show you what you could do yourself locally, if you don't do that, you can easily convince yourself that you are perfect. I mean, we're all guilty of that. We're all human. We all want to think that we do things well. But it's not very easy, is it, to admit that what you're offering is imperfect in some way and that actually you're being very inefficient. So have a good look at your competitors. Now you've got the chance through this pricing transparency rule, and really look at what they're doing and offering differently to you, or just the same as you but for a different price. And sensible feedback from clients, or particularly people who've not chosen to use your service, so consumers who backed away, if you can persuade them to give you feedback, can put you on a road to improve performance, because that's really what we need to do. So a review of competitor offerings shows immediately, to me, it jumped out at the 10 firms I looked at, which firm is the friendliest, which firm is the most logical in the way they've presented their information, or which is the most expensive, and which would appear to be the least reliable. These are all things that jumped out at me from just looking at 10 firms' websites for this exercise. So is it not worth you trying to do the same and pitching where you fit in that matrix, because that might give you some really harsh learning points that you need to address. So utilising my friend and colleague Robert Mowbray's article, he writes many excellent articles on my website, the Law Skills website. What do you need to benchmark financially to make a profit? These are the things which are part of making a profit. The first thing is about gearing. How many staff have you got? So you calculate that by taking the total number of fee earners in your firm divided by the total number of equity partners. And this gives you some clue that some firms will do better on profits because their gearing is better. They've got more people at the correct level to do the legal work. And that's fascinating when you look at the staff that are listed on websites. Some of them don't show they've got any paralegals or legal executives or trainees, and yet they're part of the gearing that makes it all worthwhile. And they may have them, but just not sharing that they've got them with the public. Secondly, hours. The total recorded chargeable hours divided by the total number of fee earners gives you some idea of what time is being spent on matters and by whom, and whether there's any productivity issues there for somebody. Is it just experience, or is it not using the tools you provided, or do they need some training and coaching because they are still at the beginning of their development of knowledge? So ensure that all time spent on matters is recorded rather than just that which you're billing, because that gives you a better idea of how the hours are being used. Rate. This is the total value of time recorded divided by the total recorded chargeable hours. So it's making a distinction between the total time and the chargeable hours. So things like marketing, training and things may be important to record. So that means that you're trying to do the right work at the maximum price which the market allows, as trying to make sure that you have as much of your time spent on chargeable matters. Recovery is crucial too, because as I said before, if you're not doing the work well, then basically people are going to query paying your fees. So total fees raised divided by total value of time recorded shows you how much time you're not recovering in terms of getting the money in from the client. And so this would obviously show you that something isn't working to optimum efficiency and certainly is not working to client satisfaction. Whatever the problem is, that needs to be found out because it's affecting your profits. And then the margin is, of course, the equity partner profit divided by the total fees raised, so that you can see where you're getting the right resources to support the fee earners, and that's really what it's all about. So I know that's more a general strategic thing, but you've got to put what you're doing in each area of law into this equation so that you can make sure that the price you're offering is the right price for your firm, but it does try and show you where you could make some improvements. So make value of the service your selling point. That's what I would recommend rather than just price. I know that firms do unbundle their service, and this means that you need to charge for a part of the service knowing what it costs to produce. It's no good if you have a fixed fee for obtaining a grant of probate and do nothing else by way of estate administration if you can't get a profit out of that fixed fee. So many firms do offer an unbundled service and quote a fixed fee for doing that. I have no problem with that at all. It's just what is the level of the fixed fee, and can you be as efficient as possible to get it to the market competitive rate. 1 out of the 10 firms I reviewed offered to obtain the grant alone with no full service for a fixed fee. One other only offered obtaining a grant for a fixed fee, which was surprising to me. They were not local to the area. They had an office in the area, but that office didn't offer the service, and it was all dealt with many miles away. So that's the only service they were prepared to offer on probate. Most of the other 8 were willing to quote for doing this, but it wasn't something that they actually offered on site. Not criticising that, that's fine, but it's what do you think people want. So a fixed fee is very good, as I've said, for a client, but it's no good to you if you can't deliver the service at less than that cost, because obviously that means ruin. So if you are not careful, all you're doing is competing on price, and you're reducing price to get work, and in the end, getting the work is the key at a particularly low price, and so actually the price becomes secondary. Instead, it's winning the work, and that might be at a price which is not actually profitable. And I don't think you can afford to do that. There's enough competition generally for probate without making things worse. So I would say really examine yourself against your competitors so you can find out whether you need to review how you're delivering the service for a price that's competing with others. There's certainly, obviously, from the example I gave you earlier, one firm in my area that needs to do that. Now, it really is important to know the difference between the cost of delivering the service and value, the value it's seen and perceived to be worth to the client. So the cost of your service is the amount you spend to produce it. Do you know that? The price is your financial reward for providing the service, so it should be different and more than the cost. And the value is what your customer believes the service is worth to them. So do you know the aspects of your service your clients value the most? Do you know which bits are not valued by clients? Because if you don't, you could be investing resources in the wrong thing, and therefore you could be investing in things which don't add value in the client's eyes. They're just costing you more, and that's increasing the cost of you providing the service. So I think it's really important to know the difference between cost and value, because actually that's how you can increase your profitability. There's also some checks and balances to put in the mix. There's the psychology of price, isn't there? In these days, clients like to haggle. They like to know what's the best price you're prepared to do things for in order to become a client and not just a consumer. So the moment you quote a price, the likelihood is they'll try and talk the price down. And it makes sense, therefore, to start with a slightly higher number when you're talking to people. If you find this difficult, you could always use the referral to a colleague ruse to say, well, I do have to get authority to make that decision. This is outside the parameters I have authority to deal with, or something like that. I think most of the time with the standard probate cases, this shouldn't be an issue, but nevertheless it could be useful when you've got a higher value case, a complex case, and what you're quoting is quite significant amounts of money. So you might need to be able to take away from the inquirer the need to get a sign-off on the fee if they're challenging what you're proposing. Some firms in my review did offer a quote via a box on the website or via email or via a phone call. So I think that's a good thing, because obviously you want any work, not just the work that you had to put the price on. And why not emphasize the human touch and say you'd be delighted to talk the person through their specific case to provide a tailored quote for their particular estate administration. Make it personal. None of the firms did that particularly. So points to review here: has the scope of the work been clearly identified? Some firms have done that well. Have relevant caveats been identified? Most firms did indicate that. Has the urgency of the matter been taken into account when you're doing a quote for a bespoke matter? Has the financial value of the matter been reflected in the quote, the seriousness of the assets involved? Have more innovative ways of quoting been properly considered? And can you do things which give people an option, a fixed fee, an hourly rate, a capped figure? These are different ways in which people are presenting fees and giving people the opportunity to choose which way they prefer. Some prefer a fixed fee, and that will always be slightly more in your eyes than perhaps you can do it for. Otherwise, you wouldn't be making a profit. But it's given them certainty, and they might like that. Whereas others may prefer to go for a capped fee based on hourly rates of those who actually do the service. And because of a blend and range of people working for you, the fee might end up being lower than a fixed fee. But it's a bit of a lottery, they don't know, but the cap gives them some reassurance. So there's different ways that if you put it to the client, they can make a choice. And obviously, from your point of view, has resourcing the matter been optimized? Have you got the right levels of staff involved? And have you used the right external resources? Okay, so price has to be transparent, but there are ways in which you can focus on service and demonstrate the range of things you can offer by way of price changes to make clients think you're a very flexible firm. Now, as I said, you do have to comply with the rules and explain that the process works in the way it should. So be clear about the probate process. Only 4 out of the 10 firms' sites I reviewed actually explained the probate process at all. 2 of them did this very well, but only in written form, and 2 simply listed the steps without any explanation of the jargon. The rest provided no overall explanation. So bearing in mind that most of us humans take more in if we see it in a picture form rather than read lots of words on a page, why don't we move from being lawyers and just producing words to maybe thinking like potential clients and do a simple diagram? So, a way of looking at things in a different way can be helpful. So to give yourself some ideas about how other organisations look at the probate process, I've given you a few websites to consider here. First of all, have you explained what's involved in the probate process? If you would like an easy way of doing this, what about making a YouTube video? You can easily link to that off your website. You can use cartoons, you can use individuals talking, but certainly that would give a different way of approaching it. Have a look at the Which website and see how useful that can be for people to have a look at. Secondly, what about providing a jargon-free description of the difference a will makes, so whether it's testate or an intestate estate? So again, the government website has an explanation of what happens when somebody dies without a will. That could be a very useful thing to give a link to. Have you distinguished between taxable and non-taxable estates? Most of the firm's sites I looked at did do this, not all of them, but most of them, and 2 of them, as I said, gave a link to the calculator. So this could be a useful link to use on your site. Have you explained the unbundling of the process? Some firms have, some firms haven't. Have a look at the Law Society practice note on unbundling to make sure that you're doing this in a correct way and are giving the right information. Have you outlined the factors which makes the administration of an estate complex and why professional advice would be sensible from your expert lawyers, for example? So to look at this from a different perspective, have a look at the Money Advice Service and how they say probate specialists might be found. So have a look at what they think makes something complex. I'm sure you'll have lots of other ideas too. And you can make it then quite easy for someone to say, well, yes, I do need a solicitor to do this because they're the ones in this firm that can demonstrate they understand my particular problem. Have you listed all the usual disbursements and explained they're on top of your fees, and also that VAT is payable on top of your fees? All bar one firm did this very well, as I mentioned. And then if you're just wanting ideas to try and write in a jargon-free way, have a look at Fact Sheet 14 on the Age UK website that talks about the probate process and what's involved. So again, it could be an expert paper that someone could just glance through. It could be a simple visual explanation with a link to a more detailed one for clients to look at later. It could be frequently asked questions with answers. There's all sorts of different ways you could approach explaining the probate process rather than the very dull way that most firms did. So what we're trying to do is to encourage you to ensure that your firm stands out. It really did surprise me how few of the local firms appeared in a Google search for solicitors in my area. And that's sad, because obviously it's no good if your firm isn't going to appear in the top 10 websites for probate on different search engines, particularly if it's linked to your town. So obviously do work on improving your website if it's not coming up on the first page for solicitors in your area. Then think of ways in which you could deliver the service which are different to your competitors. For example, a really avant-garde firm would think about this from the point of view of what can I offer that gives client value? Well, I might be able to agree a discount with a funeral organizer, an undertaker. I might be able to undertake a discount with a surveyor if I promise to give them all the work and we agree what standard that has to be too. So these might be things that you could organize locally that gives you an edge compared to your other competitors, and that would make it something worthwhile. You could also demonstrate how you ensure your firm will do things. For example, how will you find any unclaimed assets? Well, we always use a company to do this that specialises in it, like, for example, Experian's Unclaimed Asset Register. Nobody mentioned this kind of thing, whilst I'm sure many firms use these services, but nobody mentioned that they went out and made sure we'd find all the things we could using all the tools we can. So this could include using different businesses you collaborate with. For example, it could be an insurer that gives you a good deal for unoccupied property. It could be a company that specializes in valuing and selling a property. It could be a genealogist who helps to find beneficiaries. You could say how you utilize other services. So you could, for example, show that your firm is serious about finding the deceased will and ensuring it's the right beneficiaries who benefit from the deceased's hard work by collaborating with Certainty National Will Register to do a search. So, these are things which will distinguish you from some of your competitors if they're not using these tools. And you can easily do that by a case study, not listing them all, but just simply showing what you did in a particular case, and how you found a will, or how you dealt with some unclaimed assets, this kind of thing, how you got a good price from the surveyor, how you managed to get insurance. These are the ways in which you can demonstrate that good value was obtained. And of course, many of you will use IT, but what about making that really at the heart of the process? And obviously, if you do use it, how you use it to make you efficient. If nobody mentions it, which none of the firms I looked at mentioned at all, then how do they know whether you're doing it in the most cost-effective way? If nobody uses probate estate account packages, then maybe it takes them longer to produce estate accounts and they're being charged more for that part of the service. It's worthwhile mentioning something that's going to make you more efficient. So, moving on then to a next area where people were weak, which was displaying information about the probate team. Obviously, this is an opportunity to showcase your particular team. And it was interesting to note that some firms showed everyone and others only showed solicitors. I know this because obviously I know some of the local firms, and some people were missing from some firms' information. So, for example, for each member of the team, we're supposed to talk about the number of years of post-qualification experience, if you remember, and any specialist features for them. There were only 2 out of the 10 firms that did not provide this information, so most firms did. But as I say, some did it only for some people and not for others, which of course is inconsistent. So that's not a good idea. If you're going to put information up there, try and be consistent. Secondly, for each member, we're supposed to estimate, as I've said, the number of cases they have dealt with, but no firms provided that data. And equally, no firms presented any data about the percentage of time that someone spent on probate. 4 out of 10 firms did not refer at all to the complexities of any matters, and therefore whether someone had a higher level of expertise. But 6 firms clearly did do that. So there's an opportunity through the way you describe your team that you can make yourself different again. But did you actually discuss this with your team? Obviously, if you do discuss it with them, they can help you, because they can help you distinguish yourselves from another firm simply because of their personal mix of skills that they have as an individual, not just legal skills. For example, somebody might be able to use sign language. Somebody else might be able to speak a different language that could be useful. So it's worthwhile talking to them about other skills which could be beneficial. And obviously, they might have ideas for publicising these skills because of things they've done outside the office, perhaps by being involved in membership organisations like Rotary, Soroptimus, or in the case of managing young people, they might be a leader in the Scouts and Guides, something like that. And all these organisations provide training which they might be able to bring into the mix. So you could also use organisations you work with to get them to provide feedback on the skills of your individual members. For example, if someone helps out at a drop-in centre, if someone helps and volunteers with a charity dealing with the deaf, someone helps with elderly people. So this kind of thing, that might well be very useful to put some quotes on their website about them. And consider the skills that you would like to encourage staff to explore through training, such as Dementia Friend training. I know many firms have gone down this route, and that's a good thing, but not one of the firms, beg your pardon, only one of the firms mentioned that they were Dementia Friends, and I'm sure many more firms actually were, but they didn't mention it on their website. So, if you're passionate about something like that, I know it's an overused word, but then it's very much comes through in what you say about the people. And then we were supposed to talk about the experience and qualifications of those who supervise. Obviously, your firm may encourage team leaders to seek not only legal qualifications but managerial ones too. If so, why don't you shout about it? It demonstrates that they can coordinate a team of people well and lead them on and support them. Equally, how you do the supervision and how you support people can also demonstrate your caring side. And if you're trying to show empathy with customers to make clients feel at home with your firm, then surely this demonstrates that if you can support your staff, you'll be able to support clients too. So your support may range from encouraging and paying for regular training and obtaining qualifications to move somebody on in their career, to being helpful to those with caring duties or disabilities, which also would demonstrate your ability to be flexible with clients too. So this is the sort of thing which I think was wasted. Most people didn't mention any of that in their information about people. So this is all about an opportunity to showcase standards, the supervision too of solicitors' services, which comes through regulation. Not one firm in my review used the SRA's new logo to say that you were regulated by the SRA. And I think that is surprising because Law Society research has shown that decisions on which legal service provider to select can change based on protections offered and regulation given. So it's not a negative, it can be a positive. So you can use the logo on your website and you could link to the public facing pages of the SRA for people to find more information. Or you could even go the whole hog and link to the Legal Choices website, which is an explanatory website for regulators in different sectors of the law, which provide information about what their members do. So that can be quite useful, saves you writing about it all. You can explain what membership of the Law Society means. Some of you may feel it doesn't mean much, but obviously it does provide support to members and helps them to deliver the service. And you can also refer to the Legal Services Ombudsman, which only applies, of course, to those in certain sectors, not necessarily everyone who's providing legal services. So this idea that you're open to public using your service and getting the best from your service and feel confident in your service can be shown through showcasing these regulatory things as well. And then you can showcase specialist qualifications. Most firms did do a good job on identifying where their members were basically qualified in some way, so membership of STEP. But it could be that they're just members of the probate section at the Law Society, or Solicitors for the Elderly now has a qualification, doesn't it? And as I said before, Dementia Friends. These were on the whole done well, but not everybody showed this. So shout about it, explain on your organisation's website what this means, link to those organisations, and so that people can see why it's a good thing that your firm's involved. And of course you could have an accreditation like the Wills and Inheritance Quality Scheme or Lexel or something like that. So again, demonstrate why that's a good thing and how people could benefit from these things. In my little book, the Streetwise Guide to Getting the Best from Your Lawyer, I've tried my best to help people in the public find the right lawyer and show why some regulation is better than others, and therefore why not suggest to a client by putting it on your website that they can find out more about these things from my book. It certainly would mean that you wouldn't have to explain it all. So emphasize the important facts that clients need to know, that you are insured, that you're regulated by the SRA and what that means, just link to their website, that you are experts in delivering legal services, if that is true, the price tariffs that you've got to include, and what the client needs to do next, and how any complaint system works. This is what you should be doing. Now, you could go further and explain a bit about the competition and why you're different. So we know that apart from solicitors, people can do it themselves. That's the elephant in the room, isn't it? There could be a chartered legal executive, there could be a licensed conveyancer and probate practitioner, there could be a notary, there could be an accountant. All these other bodies do offer probate services that are regulated in some way. So it's a matter for you whether you feel strong to demonstrate why you're better, but don't say things which are misleading. Harnessing IT, again, is a way of demonstrating why your firm might be more suitable. And obviously, it's not just about using an Excel spreadsheet, but it's actually using services that could enable a quick quote to be obtained from your website, to use YouTube videos to explain things, to use software that helps you do the estate accounts, this kind of thing. So as we're coming to a close now, focus, I would suggest, on basically quality, not price. And this comes from the fact that the four horsemen of the apocalypse, as I think, in terms of running a service business, are quality, quantity, cost, and time. And there's always a trade-off between these things. So focusing only on price is likely to dumb down the quality of the service you provide. And I would really suggest that you should explain what good quality looks like and how you deliver it in your firm. And if you are saying that you're providing a premium service, well, then you have to show it. How does that happen? You can demonstrate it particularly well by how much effort you've put into your website. And as I say, most of the sites I viewed were okay to navigate, but 2 were truly awful. And only 2 firms produced professional downloads, and only 1 of those was properly branded. So basically, you had an opportunity to focus on quality in demonstrating price, but you chose not to do that. You went for the quick fix and produced something that wasn't very helpful. So basically, if you can't display your prices in a professional and clear way, why would anyone want to use your services to handle the estate administration? And it's not sufficient to say you're experts. You do need to demonstrate it. So what do clients really want? I think that slide says it all. Pain relief, that's what they want. My colleague Robert Mowdrey says there are 3 common themes from his research which emerge when clients are asked about service expectations. It's the desire to pass on their problem to their solicitors so they can get on with life. I'm sure that's true when they're busy working. To meet a deadline. If they've got to pay tax and things by a deadline, they're not sure, they've not done it before, that would help. And to achieve a particular financial outcome, getting the best out of the practice of dealing with their estate administration. So pain relief, that's what they want. Are we really giving them pain relief, or are we making it more painful? So LexisNexis produces something called a bellwether report, and their latest offering is the Changing Face of Law. And statistics from that show that 58% of the solicitors surveyed think that the price and customer-driven culture is impacting on the lawyer's ability to uphold the integrity of the law, that in some way it's undermining the way we deliver things. And 33% of solicitors believe, as I said before, a significant proportion of their business is won on purely price rather than expertise. Now, this may be true, but obviously for standard work, but if you're confident about distinguishing more complex work, that shouldn't really be the case. And 32% of those surveyed believe that price transparency will drive down price and quality. Well, it will if you let it. It isn't about really just examining price and nothing else. Look at your whole business model, as I've tried to let you see, and see if you can't be more efficient and more productive so that you can preserve quality and service quality in terms of price that you're offering. So the way we do things cannot remain the same as we've always done them. We have to try and move on, and the key to it all is the quality of communication. Are you and your firm excellent communicators? Can you explain how things work and what your service costs in a way that makes you stand out? Value for money does not mean being the cheapest. It means about being able to expand on why your services are the right ones. So, as the Chinese saying goes, we live in interesting times. We are heavily regulated, and the latest requirement to demonstrate price transparency may seem like a race to the bottom. But if you are creative, if you are positive, if you invest in your price transparency offering, you can make it a showcase which demonstrates quite clearly why a person should engage your firm. From looking at the 10 examples I looked at, one really did shine from my point of view, and it would be, I think, a good one for a consumer to choose. So let me hand you back to see if there's any questions, Astrid.
Hello, Gill. Thank you for that. It's compelling, and there's certainly a lot of homework out there from this
Yes,
webinar. So
I think
thank
that's
you
true.
for today. There's one main question, if I may, apart from some administrative questions. So, and this is from Eleanor Taylor from Madge, Lloyd and Gibson, and that's including Linda Stapleton and case solicitors. And she's asked, says that Gill mentions case studies being a useful way of illustrating the varying complexities of cases. What advice does Gill have in putting these together? Should they be fictional, drawing on a combination of previous cases we have acted in? And if we're going to use actual case studies, albeit anonymous, do we need the client's consent?
Well, that's a very good question. First of all, try and make it as real as possible. So I would ask a client if they would mind if you used them as an example. You don't have to name them. You don't have to do any more than just give a few bald facts as to what was involved, and you could share it with them before you published, obviously. And I would think that some people would actually be very pleased if they'd had a good service from you. They'd be glad that their example could help other people. So I think keeping it real is a really good thing. But if you're nervous about doing that, then yes, by all means, create an example. But try and make it as common as possible to what you're trying to describe. So I think it really comes alive if you can show that somebody would get the sort of service that you could offer in the way that you're describing, because it's how you do it all the time. And that's demonstrated by a case study, without a doubt.
Lovely, thank you, Gill. So that's it for questions today. We are bang on 1 o'clock, which is perfect timing. So the slides are available to download from the event resources after the webinar, and of course there is a recording available should anyone who couldn't make the time today or missed the first part can catch up at a later date. So thank you once again, Gill. And finally, everyone, as a date for your diaries, our next Certainty Expert webinar will be hosted by Mark Solon of Wilmington Legal on Wednesday, the 27th of March at midday. So as we are all professionals here today, if you can, do take a minute to join the Certainty National Will Register group on LinkedIn, and we provide really concise updates about the industry and, of course, any interesting case studies, which is quite topical considering the last question, any case studies following a Certainty will search. So thank you ever so much, Gill, and thank you from us all at Certainty, the National Will Register.
Thank you very much, Astrid, and good luck to everyone.